Switching gears a little bit, at the top of this conversation, I identified you as the first Latina and Mexican poet laureate of Mexican and Latina heritage. But you've said before that labels based on race can really just compartmentalize and, in your words, harm us. Can you talk to me about what is assumed and expected of you as a Latina poet?
Yeah. And I think we all have our own individual experiences with our identity and with people around us that want to identify us in certain ways and what that means. And I always come back to that quote by Audre Lorde, who said, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. And, I always think about that, eaten alive, right? And so, for me, I'm very proud of my Mexican heritage, and I'm very proud of being Latina. Um, but I also feel like it's very important for all writers to recognize that we should be able to embrace whatever subjects we want, and we should be able to talk about whatever we want. And one of the things I have realized over my 20 years of writing poetry is that I do think that writers of color oftentimes get asked to address trauma and address injustices in ways that white poets do not get asked to do. And so I think it's really important that as Latinx writers that we remember that we have the full range of imagination and that no one is allowed to cut us off and tell us, "Oh, because you're from El Salvador, you must write about this experience," or the only way that I will celebrate you is because you write about this trauma, you know? I want all of the poets to recognize that we can also write about joy and we can also write about heartbreak. Um, and that it's not just one experience, but that we are all of us individuals and having our own experiences and our own musicality. And I think that's incredibly, I think that's taken for granted sometimes. And that can come from outside of our communities. People will want, and sometimes very good heartedly, want to celebrate inclusion and diversity, but sometimes in doing so, we'll also say, "Oh, we want you to speak about this." And I think that as writers of color, sometimes we have to be a little all elbows and say, "Hey, well, I wanna write about a tree," and I especially see that as young people coming up, that I want to make sure they can write about trauma if they want, and they can write about a tree if they want.